Hi everybody, Jared O'D here at Dynamis, and welcome back. This is part two of the excerpts we released from my recent interview with Professor Chris Cushion at Loughborough University. The full interview is available. You can click the link near the video here to get access to the full video and some other resources. On this clip, you're going to hear Professor Chris talk about coach behaviors and how what we do and what we say really affect the learning that happens when we're running a session. I ask him about coach attributes and the number one piece of kit that a coach needs, and he talks about a couple of other issues. I hope it brings you value. Feel free to go ahead and get access to the full interview, and without further ado, here you go.
There are lots of things we can't control in the environment. The one thing we can control is what, as coaches and instructors, what we do and say, the order that we, so we organise the environment in which training takes place. We then engage with the learner, so that's all under our control. And learning, we're innately programmed to learn as humans, but again, we've overthought things and tried to make things simple and more straightforward, but inadvertently got away with the learning, interrupted a learning process. So if you organise a practice environment in a certain way and behave as an instructor, as a coach in a certain way, you're actually blocking the learning process rather than help encourage it. And
I think I've heard you say before, people will learn anyway. It's whether or not the coach's behaviours are supporting that or impeding.
Well, learners learn.
Right.
Learners learn.
Yeah.
Learners learn. How long it takes them, we can teach anybody. Most people can learn to do most things to a degree, so you might not be a concert pianist, but you can learn to play the piano. It might take you 30 years, but you can learn to play the piano. Whether you're any good at it, that's another discussion. But most people can learn to do most things to a level that they,
including coaches.
Including coaches.
So coaches need to learn how to be better coaches.
Coaching is a learned skill. One of the difficulties with working in coach development, trainer development, is unlike, I don't know, if I said to you, fly a plane, you wouldn't know how to do it. You'd need to learn how to do it. Whereas if I said, instruct this person, you just go, well, yeah, I can do that. So there's an assumption that we can do it. So there's which follows the assumption I don't need to learn how to do it because I can just do it, right? Because coaching's easy and everyone can do it. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Yes, most people can learn to do it, or everyone can learn to do it. Some will be better than others, but you need to learn how to do it, and there are things and principles that you probably need to learn along the way.
So, quick questions then. So I told you to ask you these. Let's see. Let's lead it straight on from that. Number one, personal attribute of a good coach in your experience.
Personal attribute, I would say, attributes, open mind, and self-aware, self-critical. Don't assume that everything is ask questions about your practice. Don't assume you've got all the answers.
So the first thing I think Chris, one of the first things he advised me to do was to go ahead and video record myself as I teach and then to review that video. He said, essentially to paraphrase, he said, if we never talk again, that's how you're going to get better, is to record yourself teaching and then cast a critical eye over that. So.
Yeah, well, essentially, we think we behave a certain way. We think we're doing, so research shows us that coaches have quite a low self-awareness, so they'll get an idea of a perception of their behaviour and a perception of their practice, and it's usually about 80% wrong and about 20% right. So the way to find out about yourself is to video it and look at, take a step back and look at what you're doing.
So next question then.
Yes.
Number one piece of kit that a coach should have if they want to get better.
Number one piece of kit that's really inexpensive, I would say, would be a stopwatch.
Okay.
Because time on task is a proxy for learning, and you need to be in control of time for a whole range of reasons. So to maximise time on task, to limit the war stories, to manage transitions and breaks, so if people are on training courses to learn to do something, it makes sense that they spend the most time learning to do something, not listening to somebody else talk about it or standing with their mates having a coffee or meandering from thing to thing. And the way that you control that is by timing it. So I'm going to work for 5 minutes, I'm going to time it for 5 minutes, we're going to have a 5 minute break, or whatever it is, and have it on a stopwatch so you know, because time slips away. And it's also important about the quality of the learning experience. So again, I have worked with coaches where they will set up some quite nice practices and people are rotating round. So they're practicing different things as part of a scenario or a situation, and the practice design is really good. But as a learner, I get 1 minute on this, 3 minutes on that, 6 minutes on that. So it's really uneven, and depending. So you inadvertently are creating an emphasis on a different aspect of the scenario and not really realising that you're doing it. And the way that you control it is to time it with a stopwatch.
Advice for trainers who meet a group and they go, "Well, that was a difficult group today."
So my first question is, what did you do? Why do you think they're a difficult group? So again, lots of times, working with different coaches, I've coached all over the world, and I've worked for a coaching company in the United States. So we used to travel, play a little bit, coach a little bit, move to the next place, play a little bit, coach a little bit, move to the next place. And every place we arrived, there was one coach would come, terrible group. They were a nightmare to work with. And okay, so the first couple of weeks, okay, tell me a little bit about, what's wrong with the group. What was the issues with the group? Oh, they were this, they were that. But after 6 weeks of this, when you're travelling around and they're completely different groups, it's a fresh start every week. You're starting to ask the question, hang on a minute, maybe it's not the groups, maybe it's the instructor and the coach. So if you've got if your perception is that you've got a difficult group, I would be asking, what are you doing? Why are you making what are you doing as a coach? And it's something, we're quite quick to blame the people standing in front of us rather than look in the mirror and say, well, actually, if I'd have structured this environment differently, if I'd have behaved in a slightly different way, some of these problems would have gone away.